Deliver Us the Moon is one of those games that fly under the radar. I think I had heard the name mentioned once or twice, but always assumed it to be some sort of game similar to Factorio, where you craft stuff and try to survive. No idea why, but that sort of gameplay is the first that comes to mind when I hear the name. Just by chance the other night I saw the game mentioned in a meme, and after checking out a trailer I came to realize that this might actually be exactly my kind of story-driven game. First, let's talk about Ultrawide. The game will pretend to support it, but the image gets zoomed in, making it unplayable in that way. The devs have responded to the request for a field of view slider over a year ago, saying that it has been requested a lot and they will add it in an upcoming patch. Needless to say that such a patch never came. Instead, they advised the players to add a line in one of the game's files. As annoying as it may be, it actually worked and the game ran very well from that point on. Deliver Us the Moon starts with a short summary of its story. Humanity has drained the Earth of all natural resources and entered a world energy crisis. In order to solve this problem, we looked towards the moon and found that it contains a new source of energy. Within a few years, a colony was established and soon our worries were a thing of the past, until the deliveries suddenly stopped for no reason whatsoever. Now it's been 5 years since nothing has been transferred, Earth is more barren than ever, and our protagonist is tasked with flying to the moon, fixing the problem, and also finding out what happened there. I have many problems with this story. First of all, how come there are no more options for energy production on Earth? Solar, wind, and water don't work anymore? I mean, we are shown that our planet has changed for the worst and now it's more or less a giant desert with tons of sandstorms. Seems to me that those winds could be used for energy production. Yes, the sand is an issue, but we could figure it out for sure. If we can build a base on the moon and extract energy from there, then transport it to Earth, I think we can handle the sand problem. And even if we agree with that, the way energy is transferred from the moon to Earth is through some sort of wave transmission. Basically, a giant ray of energy is projected from the moon towards a special satellite dish on Earth. The problem here is that while the moon really always faces the Earth at the same angle, our planet actually keeps spinning around its own axis, meaning that the moon will not be facing the same location at all times. I guess they could be sending the waves at specific times so that everything's aligned, but the story sure doesn't say anything about that. I know I'm being very nitpicky here, but if you're going to write such a story, you should at least do the minimal amount of research. I mean, they could have thought of various future tech designs that would make this work and explained it really quickly. Right now it seems to be just out there. Another problem is that the gravity on the moon should be much lower than that on Earth, yet we take fall damage. Why? It serves absolutely no purpose and just got me killed when I tried to save time by jumping down a few meters instead of using a ladder. But I am getting ahead of myself. First, let's talk about the obvious. The game looks really good. It's both gorgeous and atmospheric. I would like to address another problem with the story here. We learn very early on that this is actually the second expedition to the moon after the deliveries have stopped. As we find more and more recordings made by a female engineer from the first team, we also realize that she never made it back. Basically, some stuff happens and the team has to return really quickly. She doesn't make it in time. I don't want to explain more because that might be spoilers, although it's explained really early in the game. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. What matters is that finding her becomes our secondary objective. The problem with this is that we have no real motivation to do so. You see, the character is not someone we truly care about. This could have easily been done better. Since her name is Sarah, which just so happens to be the name of my wife, I imagined that she was our protagonist's wife. A bit like how it was in Dead Space. Now my motivation to find her was far greater. Imagine your wife is an engineer and is going on an expedition to outer space. It's supposed to be a short trip, but then when the crew returns, she's not with them. Of course you would want to go look for her if the chance arose. Then, as a matter of fact, you do get that opportunity, and although it seems like a suicide mission, I think we can all place ourselves in that role and each of us would go without thinking twice. This type of story may have been done a million times before, but there's a reason for that. Simply because it works. It taps into our humanity and our most basic desire to protect those we love at all costs. So it will never get old. It's disappointing that the devs didn't go that way if you ask me, but my imagination was good enough to get the ball rolling. At the beginning we are on Earth preparing to launch the rocket. I really enjoyed the starting sequence because it felt very authentic. When you think about it, it's just a series of button presses, but then again, so is the real launch of a rocket. As you leave Earth's atmosphere, you immediately feel like it's the beginning of a difficult adventure with humanity's survival resting on your very shoulders. It also feels lonely, and I love that. The whole experience is scary in its own way. Space is a dangerous place, and when you are so far from any help, you know that you are truly on your own. This feeling of ultimate loneliness never left me as I was playing the game, and it was both chilling and yet somehow enjoyable. The game's music is mostly very atmospheric and calm. You know that time is of the essence, but some things simply cannot be rushed, especially considering that any mistakes can cost you your life and ultimately would mean the failure of the mission, meaning that Earth's fate will be the same as yours. As you investigate what happened and try to fix the many issues of the moon base, you encounter numerous puzzles. Almost all of them are very easy and will pose no challenge. I do appreciate the fact that the game does not hold your hand too much. You have your PDA, which has objectives noted, but I ignored it completely and was able to beat the game within 4 hours, even though I did get lost once. I know what you're thinking. 4 hours doesn't sound like much, and it truly isn't. But to me the duration felt very appropriate. There's only so much you can do with this one premise, and stretching it too thin runs the risk of boring the player. At one time, an explosion shoots you outside of the space station, reminding you of the fact that here every mistake or just bad luck can quickly lead to your doom. Your spacesuit only holds 3 minutes of air, but you can refill it with small air canisters. This was obviously done so that the player can have something more to do while taking care of business, but it is very strange that there's so little air at your disposal. I mean, when you consider the fact that divers can hold a lot more. Later on, you get to use a rover in order to complete some objectives on the surface of the moon. I was reminded of Mass Effect when I was driving this thing. These sections are quiet and beautiful to look at, but offer next to no value in terms of gameplay. It's just something you use to get from A to B and back. If you try to explore a bit, the game warns you that you are going out of bounds. However, there are clearly some buildings in the distance which look quite interesting. As the story progresses, you will actually be able to reach these buildings by monorail. This again is really strange because when you drive the rover, it feels like you could go there really quickly if the game did not block it for some reason. Sadly, driving the monorail is also one of those sections of the game where QuickTime events come into play, and I found it very annoying. It feels like the pacing of the game changes suddenly, and it got me killed a few times before I was able to readjust to reacting faster. You may have noticed that there's a little drone flying next to my character. It looks suspiciously like Wheatley from Portal. It can be controlled in order to solve some of the minor puzzles and open some doors for you, but there's not much more than that. They give it sort of a personality, but since it can't talk and its emotional responses are mostly neutral with the exception of a few sections, I didn't manage to establish any connection to that thing. There will be enemy drones too, and the game will use them as an obstacle which needs to be avoided by the player. There's actually a section which I can only describe as a tiny labyrinth, which is being patrolled and guarded by a bunch of these enemy drones. That section was so annoying. Not only did they kill me a bunch of times, but the checkpoint was placed in such a way that as soon as I respawned, I would get attacked and hit by them, taking damage before I can even move or react, forcing me to seek cover and wait for my character to recover, since 2 of these hits will kill you and I already got 1. I would have loved to have some alternative options when it came to some of the puzzles. The maze with the drones in particular could have offered me a way to shut them down or avoid them completely besides sneaking through the maze directly. But sadly, every puzzle in this game has only one solution. There's no deviation from that. The positive thing is that the game manages to offer us enough variety in the environments and puzzle types so that we don't get bored. Obviously they can't all be good, but at least it doesn't feel like we're doing the same thing over and over again. At least not all of the time. With such a game, the story of course is king. The gameplay might be okay, but it's only secondary to the narrative. And unfortunately, the more we play and find out, the less sense it all makes. It's full of plot holes which I can't discuss without entering spoiler territory. My biggest issue is that our character seems to be quite stupid and incompetent. He will sometimes do things in the wrong order and then have to solve the problem he just created himself. And on top of that, there was even an instance where this happened right after he saw a recording of the proper order, which describes that doing it in the wrong order is gonna cause a lot of problems, yet he still did. This is of course completely outside of the player's control, so there's nothing you can do except follow what the game wants you to do for narrative reasons that don't make any sense. And of course you get to fix the mess that you just made, although the game forced you to do it. My personal reimagining of the story made it better, but the actual one was poorly executed and full of plot holes, as I have mentioned before. This is where Deliver Us the Moon failed to score for me. Regardless, I found the game to be both relaxing and very enjoyable. Is it worth $25? Well, that's something each person must decide for themselves. To me, it was kind of worth it. Sometimes it's just nice to be able to finish a game in a single evening. We're all busy and committing to a super long game is not always a viable option, but 4 hours can always be arranged. Deliver Us the Moon is not a masterpiece, but it's not a bad game either. If you're looking for a relaxing space theme adventure, this is a good option. The story could be a lot better, but it will still be interesting enough for most players. While $25 may be a bit too much for most of you considering that it's only 4 hours, if you should find it for €15 or less, I'd say go ahead and get it. At that price, it will definitely be a good deal for what you get here. With that having been said, I'd like to thank you for watching Game Filter. Share any thoughts you may have in the comments section below, especially if you have played the game or consider getting it. I hope to see you again next time, and until then, have a great day.